Imagine waking up on a normal day, opening your phone to check NBA news, and suddenly running into a question that turns everything upside down. What if Golden State were really willing to blow everything up and make a gigantic trade to chase one more title while Stephen Curry is still playing at an absurd level? It's no longer just loose speculation. Behind the scenes, the noise is getting louder and louder about a scenario that would put Anthony Davis next to Curry in the Bay Area, create a monstrous front court with Draymond Green, and could completely redefine the ending of this Warriors era. The backdrop is simple but powerful. Even close to 40, Curry is still a nightmare for any defense. His averages remain around 27 points per game, with shooting efficiency that borders on perfection for someone who carries so much offensive responsibility. A true shooting percentage north of 60% shows that he is not just scoring. He is doing it in surgical fashion, picking his spots, punishing every slip-up, and keeping the franchise alive in tight games night after night. The problem is that, as good as he is, nobody wins on their own. That is where the big question comes in. Can the roster around him keep up with that level? The answer, for now, is sometimes. There are games where everyone clicks, the ball moves, the defense locks in, and the team looks like that old steamroller that marked an era. But there are also nights when age shows. The lack of size in the paint becomes painfully obvious, and the rotation fails to provide the consistency a genuine title contender needs. And the front office knows it. They know the window of opportunity with Curry will not last forever. That is why, inside the front office, the idea of going all in is gaining strength. A high-profile analyst in the United States drew up a 3-team trade proposal involving Golden State, the Sacramento Kings, and the Dallas Mavericks that, if it ever came to life, would put Anthony Davis in a Warriors jersey. It is no exaggeration to say it would be an earthquake across the entire league, one of those moves that makes everyone stop what they are doing to check the notification on their phone. In this scenario, the Warriors would give up on an experiment that is still being tested with Jimmy Butler to force a solution to their size problem in the paint. Davis would arrive to be the perfect screen-and-roll partner for Curry, someone capable of punishing defenses both in the interior game and in pick-and-pop actions, as well as protecting the rim at an elite level. On the other side, the Mavericks would receive a robust package with DeMar DeRozan, Malik Monk, a young point guard like Devin Carter, and a combination of draft picks from the Kings and Warriors, including protected and future first-round selections plus a second-rounder. The Kings, in turn, would get Butler to immediately raise the competitive ceiling of their team. But as with any big gamble, there is a price, and in Davis's case, everyone knows exactly where the sensitive point is: his injury history. The big man, now just over 30, has already missed a considerable number of games throughout his career due to different physical issues. Even in Dallas, before the recent calf injury, he had been showing his usual impact with around 21 points, 10 rebounds, more than 1 steal, and more than 1 block per game, with over half of his shots falling. When he is healthy, he is one of the most dominant players in the NBA on both ends of the floor. The when, however, is the heart of the debate. From Golden State's point of view, the question is harsh. Is it worth risking part of the future and what little flexibility remains in the roster for a star who could change everything, or be off the floor in the decisive moments? At the same time, there is another silent fear hovering over the franchise. What if they never have another player at Curry's level again? What if they waste these last years of his career by trying to be too conservative? It is this dilemma that makes the rumor so intriguing. While all of that is being discussed, another drama is playing out on the court in parallel: Jonathan Kuminga's. The young forward started the season strongly, showing growth on defense, attacking the rim aggressively, and making it clear he has the potential to be both a piece for the future and for the present. But things changed quickly. Tendinitis, a dip in form, the loss of his starting spot, and, suddenly, he finds himself in a strange limbo. He is the most talented young player on the team, but he does not have a guaranteed role. The new starting 5 Golden State has put together is built on spacing and speed. Curry running the show, Moses Moody getting more minutes, Will Richard making the most of every second, Jimmy Butler bringing versatility, and Draymond Green orchestrating both the defense and the offense with his feel for the game. It is a group that makes a lot of tactical sense, especially if the idea is to maximize Curry's game, spread the floor, and push the pace. But inevitably, it pushes Kuminga into a secondary role just when he needed continuity to prove his worth. In a contract year, the pressure only increases. Every minute on the court starts to be scrutinized under a microscope by the fans, the front office, and the rest of the league. That is where something that surprised a lot of people comes in. Draymond Green's stance. Known for saying exactly what he thinks with no filter, often criticizing teammates or openly calling out mistakes, he chose to go in the opposite direction with Kuminga. In recent interviews, he has made a point of defending the youngster, saying he is one of the most dedicated athletes on the roster and nowhere near what many people make him out to be. That support is no small thing. Green is a highly respected voice within the franchise, both among players and the coaching staff. When he steps in front to protect a younger teammate, it sends a clear message. The veterans believe Kuminga can still be important, and that can influence not only the player's own confidence but also how the organization views his future with the team. Maybe he is still seen as a trade asset. Maybe he is also seen as someone who, if he finally clicks, can be one of the pillars of the transition when Curry's years come to an end. Golden State's track record with developing young players is, at best, uneven. Some talents ended up not reaching what was expected of them there. But lately, something has changed. Moses Moody, Brandon Podziemski, and Will Richard himself have emerged as important names in the rotation, all under 25, all with clearly defined roles on the court. In the middle of one of the most veteran-heavy rosters in the league, this injection of youth is vital. Without it, the team would simply become too slow, too heavy, and far too predictable. And it is precisely the combination of veterans who have been through everything in the NBA and hungry young players that is starting to make Warriors fans feel something that seemed lost: identity. After a few frustrating seasons, early playoff exits, and questions about whether the magic was gone, the team is once again showing flashes of that style that won over so many people. Aggressive defense, constant off-ball movement, high-voltage three-point shooting, and the sense that any 12-0 run can break out at any moment. From the bench, Steve Kerr is the conductor of this return to their roots. The coach who arrived, broke the league's logic, piled up finals appearances, and lifted trophies, now finds himself in a completely different phase of his career, with a reshaped roster, aging stars, and 3 seasons below the golden standard he himself set. Even so, he seems to have found the path again. Go back to basics. Go back to what has always worked. Go back to the DNA of passes, cuts, off-ball screens, and defensive discipline. The ball movement numbers back this up. Golden State is among the teams that make the most passes per game, that generate the most potential assists, that produce the most so-called secondary assists. The famous pass to the player who makes the pass that leads to the basket. It is not just aesthetically pleasing, it is functional. When the ball never sticks and everyone is a threat, defenses get lost, start making communication mistakes, leave shooters open, or concede drives with a numbers advantage. And that is exactly where Curry, Butler, Moody, Podziemski, and company thrive. Another stat that shows this return to their roots is in the screens that directly generate points for teammates, the so-called screen assists. The team has gone back to making great use of screens to free up its shooters and creators, and that shows in the high volume of made three-pointers. It is not just pass and pray that someone hits a shot. It is a designed system in which every cut and every screen has a purpose. This style of play demands chemistry, reading of the game, and mutual trust, and little by little that trust seems to have been rebuilt. But even with the offense regaining its shine, the foundation of the great Warriors era was never just the offensive show. It was always the defense. And this season, the team is once again ranking among the best defenses in the league in terms of rating, making shots difficult, contesting on the perimeter, protecting the rim, and sprinting back to prevent easy fast break points for opponents. There is still room for adjustments, of course. In some games, rebounding issues or excessive fouling pop up. But the structure is there, a solid scheme, led by Green, with versatile pieces around him, capable of adapting to different types of opponents. The curious thing is that while all of this is happening, young players growing, the system reappearing, the defense solidifying, Anthony Davis's name hangs over everything like a what-if shadow. What if this team, which is starting to rediscover its own way of playing, added a dominant big man who can still guard multiple positions and finish at a high level? Would that lift the Warriors to an even higher tier? Or would it mess too much with a chemistry that is finally starting to stabilize again? It is a delicate balance, and the story gets even more interesting when another name enters the conversation: LeBron James. The idea of seeing LeBron and Curry playing together has always sounded like something out of a video game, a topic for barroom debates, not for front office meetings. But after everything that has happened in the league in recent years, unthinkable trades, idols changing jerseys, dynasties rising and falling, who can say with certainty that it could never happen? Some analysts have already started to speculate about a kind of farewell tour for LeBron at Golden State, a final stretch of his career in the Bay Area chasing one last ring alongside one of the greatest shooters of all time. Now imagine putting both things together. Davis already in Golden State, LeBron assessing his options in free agency, the desire to fight for another title, and the frustration of seeing major decisions being made without his direct input in past trades. Could the possibility of reuniting with his old title-winning partner in a competitive, well-structured environment like the Warriors weigh on him? Would the chance to wear blue and gold for a year or two, surrounded by champion veterans and promising youngsters, be tempting enough to give up money and accept a smaller contract just to try something historic? People around the league know that moves like this depend on an almost perfect alignment. Cap situation, what the player wants, where the franchise is in its cycle, market dynamics, fan pressure, and even what other stars are doing. None of that is simple, but the mere existence of this kind of conversation shows something very clear. Golden State is still seen as a heavyweight destination, a place where veteran giants with huge legacies look and think another title could come from there. And as long as that remains true, rumors like these will keep popping up. And all of this does not even take into account another key factor that is shaking up the trade market and opening doors: the silent collapse of some direct rivals in the Western Conference, such as the Los Angeles Clippers, who are starting to flirt with a possible shift from buyers to sellers. That may be exactly the kind of opening that creates unexpected opportunities for the Warriors to move in the market, whether by going after a rim-protecting specialist, adding more three-point shooting, or reinforcing the bench with experienced veterans. When we look at the Western Conference picture, it becomes clear that the Warriors' future does not depend only on what happens inside their own building. There is another team that unintentionally could become a key piece in this puzzle: the Los Angeles Clippers. A lot of people lumped Warriors and Clippers together before the season started, as two veteran franchises trying to squeeze the last great years out of their stars. But while Golden State has managed to rediscover its identity, the Clippers are dangerously walking in the opposite direction, piling up losses, injuries, and frustration. And when a team with a huge payroll, expensive players, and little return on the court starts to sink, the market can smell the opportunity. Without their main wing consistently healthy, the Clippers have dropped a brutal stretch of games, many of them by small margins, which only heightens the sense of waste. The big free agency signing, who arrived to be a central piece, is out for the rest of the season. Another important starter, a forward who helps on defense and floor spacing, is dealing with a knee issue that will sideline him for weeks. The roster, which was supposed to be deep, suddenly has to rely too heavily on rotation pieces, and the losses start to stack up. To make matters worse, their 2026 first-round pick, completely unprotected, belongs to the current champion of the opposite conference. In other words, tanking is not an option. This puts the Clippers' front office at a complicated crossroads. They cannot simply throw the season in the trash because they will not even reap the benefit of a high draft pick. At the same time, if they insist on kicking the can down the road and the results do not come, they risk seeing the trade value of their veterans drop. This is exactly where Golden State comes in as a possible partner. If the Clippers realize they are not going to truly compete, They may be forced into becoming sellers, listening to offers for players who, in another context, would not be available. The Warriors have already monitored some names on this roster in the past, including veterans capable of contributing in specific stretches, such as an experienced wing who offers high basketball IQ, solid defense, and decent shooting, even if his current numbers do not jump off the page. Another name that has long floated on Golden State's radar, even though he is now on the Clippers, is a center known as a rim protector and a specialist in three-pointers from the top of the key, someone who once played an important role on a title-contending team in the East. Imagine that kind of player coming off the bench to reinforce the paint, fitting into the movement and spacing system, while Quinton Post still swings between promising flashes and moments that show his lack of experience. The most interesting part is that, unlike a trade for Anthony Davis, exploring an opportunity with the Clippers could cost much less in terms of assets. Instead of giving up precious young players and multiple draft picks, the Warriors might be able to add depth, size, and defense using mid-sized contracts, secondary picks, and small tweaks in the rotation. It would not be a franchise-altering move, but it could be exactly the sort of quiet reinforcement that, in the playoffs, makes the difference between going out in the second round or returning to a conference finals. Of course, there is always another, more extreme scenario hovering on the horizon. What if, at the peak of their desperation, the Clippers reach the point of listening to offers for their biggest perimeter star? It is unlikely, almost unthinkable at first glance, but in an environment with pressure for results, a string of injuries, and a closing window, radical decisions cannot be completely ruled out. Golden State, however, would only seriously consider such a drastic move if they were also in a state of maximum urgency, something that, given their current performance and rediscovered identity, does not yet seem to be the case. While the front office maps the market and watches rivals slip up, there is another enemy the Warriors have had to face head-on at the start of this season: the schedule. If on the court the team keeps the ball moving, off the court, everything has revolved around travel, back-to-backs, and an absurd run of games squeezed into a short period. At a certain point in the campaign, the team had already played more games than anyone else in the league, with an enormous number of road games and a marathon that barely allowed them to breathe between one tough matchup and the next. This insane routine affects everything. Practices are shorter. Physical recovery is rushed. There are few opportunities to calmly adjust tactical details. Players are crossing time zones, sleeping in hotels night after night, trying to keep their bodies ready to respond at a high level. It is no coincidence that even influential voices in American media looked at the Warriors' schedule and jokingly said it felt like a personal vendetta from the league, as if someone in charge had something against the franchise. It was a joke, of course, but with a hint of truth. The schedule really was disproportionate, especially compared to some direct rivals who had far fewer back-to-backs over the same stretch. Steve Kerr, who has been through everything in the NBA as a player and coach, even admitted he had never seen such a brutal start to a season. Coming from someone who lived through different eras of the league, traveled in less comfortable conditions, and played in times with fewer technological resources for recovery, that says a lot about the level of difficulty Golden State has faced. And even so, despite all this load, the team has kept a winning record, shown competitiveness against strong opponents, and avoided falling apart mentally. The upside to all this is that the season has a fixed number of games. If the start is a logistical nightmare, at some point the schedule starts to ease up. That means more home games, more rest between matchups, fewer long trips, and, consequently, more chances for Kerr to fine-tune details, manage planned rest for the stars, and better work on the integration between veterans and young players. If the Warriors managed to survive such a brutal beginning with morale still relatively high, the message is clear. If they did not break now, they are in a great position to grow once the conditions become more favorable. And it is precisely this perspective of gradual improvement that makes the debate around blockbuster trades even more delicate. Imagine if the team, even with a cruel schedule, is already showing it can compete, rediscovering its identity, and seeing young players like Moody, Podziemski, Richard, and even Kuminga himself, when healthy, contributing. It is a fair question to ask. Is it really worth blowing up this structure for a massive gamble on someone like Anthony Davis? Or is the smarter strategy to use the market surgically, looking for specific complementary pieces while calmly watching how this group evolves with a fairer schedule? In the middle of all this, Kuminga once again becomes a point of intersection between present and future. If he responds well to Draymond Green's public vote of confidence, accepts the role the coaching staff gives him, and goes back to impacting games with aggressive defense, strong drives to the basket, and energy in transition, he can both solidify his place as a rotation piece on a title run and significantly increase his trade value in any potential deal. In other words, the way he approaches this moment may define whether he will be part of the solution in Golden State or the key to unlocking an even bigger move. Likewise, the return to the Warriors' classic style is not just about nostalgia. When the team goes back to being one of the league's best in ball movement, potential assists, off-ball actions, and made three-pointers, it automatically becomes more attractive to superstars. Think about how a player of LeBron's stature sees this: an organized system with a clear identity, led by a point guard he deeply respects, backed by a winning culture and a coach who knows how to manage big egos. If there is a real chance of another ring in that environment, it is not absurd to imagine someone of that caliber considering a smaller contract just to have the opportunity to finish their career in style. And that is when the big chessboard heats up. In one corner, the possibility of a gigantic trade for Anthony Davis, which would immediately solve the issue in the paint, but bring constant injury concerns and a high cost in assets. In another corner, the option of using the market more conservatively, taking advantage of a possible involuntary fire sale from the Clippers to add useful veterans without compromising the future as much. And above it all, the almost cinematic idea of a final act of LeBron's career alongside Curry, on a team that mixes the last embers of a dynasty with the spark of rising young players. In the end, everything comes down to one central question that will guide every decision in the front office. What is the real level of urgency? Do the Warriors believe that, with the current roster, plus a few targeted tweaks, they can get back to fighting at the very top? Or do they see that without a superstar big man at Davis's level, they will once again run into physical and tactical limitations in the playoffs? The brutal early season schedule, the rebirth of their playing style, the development of the young core, the volatile market with rivals sinking, the rumors involving superstars, all of this is part of the same equation, and that is precisely why the next few months may be decisive not only for this season, but for Curry's final legacy, for Kuminga's future, for Kerr's image as a strategist capable of reinventing himself, and even for how the NBA will remember this Warriors generation. They are in one of those rare moments when every small move, a trade, a signing, a change in the starting five, a bet on a young player, can alter the course of history. When we put all the pieces of this puzzle together, it starts to become clear that the Warriors are at the kind of crossroads that defines eras. That is not an exaggeration. Every decision the front office makes now will echo not only in this season, but in how the story of this core will be told in a few years' time. Will they be remembered as the franchise that knew how to reinvent itself and squeeze every last drop out of Curry's final years? Or as the team that hesitated too much, was afraid to take risks, and watched the window slowly close while other forces in the West organized themselves? Imagine, for example, the scenario in which Golden State pulls the trigger and brings in Anthony Davis. In that hypothetical world, you suddenly have one of the greatest point guards in history playing alongside one of the most talented centers of the modern NBA. Defensively, it would be a nightmare for any offense. Green could stay freer to organize the defense on the perimeter, while Davis protects the rim and plugs gaps in the passing lanes. On big nights, the opponent would have to choose, guard the three-point line and watch Davis punish them inside, or sink into the paint and open up space for Curry to punish them from the perimeter. Offensively, the impact would be enormous. Picture the pick and rolls, pick and pops, handoffs, and cuts to the basket with Curry and Davis interacting all the time. Every screen could generate 3 genuine options: A mid-range jumper for Davis, a drive to the rim for a layup, or a three-pointer for Curry. In a system already known for being fluid, full of reads and controlled improvisation, inserting a player with that arsenal could raise the team's ceiling to a level that very few franchises can reach. But at the same time, think about the other side of the coin. To make a trade like that possible, you would probably have to give up depth, promising young players and valuable draft picks. The roster would become heavier in terms of salaries and more fragile in terms of the number of reliable bodies for the regular rotation. A potential injury to Davis at the worst possible moment, something history shows cannot be ruled out, could leave the team far too dependent on heroics. It would be the classic all-or-nothing move in practice. If it works, it becomes a chapter in a book. If it fails, it becomes a cautionary example for future generations. Now set that scenario alongside a very different one: internal development. Instead of shaking up the whole structure, the front office decides to bet on what is already showing signs of working. The plan would be something like this: keep Curry and Green as the emotional and tactical pillars, establish Butler as the reference on both ends of the floor, steadily give more minutes and responsibility to Moody, Podziemski, Richard, Post, and, of course, Kuminga, and use the market only to fix specific imbalances. A shot-blocking specialist at center, a wing who hits corner threes, a cerebral veteran to run the second unit. In that case, the team's identity would continue to grow stronger. Kerr could work calmly, without having to redraw everything mid-season. The youngsters' confidence would grow with every good performance, and the rotation would become more stable. The team could reach the playoffs with a solid structure, perhaps without a second superstar at Davis's level, but with a collective so well-tuned that it would make up for that absence. It would not be the most eye-catching path, it would not generate explosive headlines, but it might be the most sustainable in the medium term. And then comes the third path, perhaps the most seductive from a narrative point of view. The combination of both worlds, where the moves made now pave the way for something even bigger in the future. Imagine that the Warriors somehow managed to build a competitive roster, with Davis or without Davis, and still position themselves as the ideal destination for a late career run by LeBron. The idea of a farewell tour for him alongside Curry is not just a social media fantasy. It is based on concrete factors: mutual respect between the stars, admiration for each other's style of play, a winning culture, and the chance to do something that would immediately enter the NBA's collective imagination as one of the greatest final acts in history. If that were to happen in a context where the Warriors already had their house in order, reliable youngsters, strong defense, an offense with a clear identity, a more forgiving schedule, the arrival of a star of that caliber would be just the finishing touch, not the savior of the franchise. LeBron would not be coming in to put out fires, but to fan a flame that was already burning. That changes everything. Veteran players prefer to arrive where there is already structure in place, and that is exactly what the franchise has been trying to rebuild after seasons below its usual standard. When we talk about everything fitting together, that is precisely the point. None of these decisions can be taken looking at a single piece in isolation. Kuminga is not just a young player in a contract year. He is a symbol of the dilemma between betting on the future or using him as currency to strengthen the present. Davis is not just a dominant center. He is the personification of extreme risk and reward, the type of move that can bring a ring or charge a very high price in terms of roster depth. LeBron is not just a distant rumor. He represents the organization's pulling power, the living proof that the Warriors' culture still carries weight around the league. The brutal schedule at the start of the season, in turn, is not just a logistical detail. It works as a test of resilience and character. If the team comes through this storm with a positive record, that strengthens the internal belief that this core deserves to be backed. If, on the contrary, the wear and tear exposes glaring limitations, that serves as a warning that it may not be enough to simply grow from within. When the schedule eases up and games are more spaced out, the front office will have a much clearer picture of which of these paths makes the most sense. Another factor that helps everything connect is the psychological effect on the fan base. Warriors fans are no longer just ordinary supporters. They are people used to living at extremes: historic seasons, 70-win campaigns, consecutive finals, epic titles, and at the same time, years of injuries, frustration, and uncertainty. This crowd has learned to read signs, to watch body language, to notice when the team is just going through the motions and when it truly believes it can fight at the top. That is why every decision from the front office is judged not only by what it brings on the court, but by what it communicates in terms of ambition. If the franchise moves too timidly, the feeling may be one of complacency. They don't want to take risks because they are afraid of making mistakes. If it takes too many risks, sending away beloved youngsters and future picks, part of the fan base may feel that the team is being thrown into an abyss with no safety net. Finding that middle ground, where the fan sees courage but also sees intelligence, is just as important as finding the perfect trade on paper. The narrative is part of the game. Inside the locker room, all of this matters too. Players are not blind. They read rumors, listen to podcasts, watch TV debates, feel the mood. Kuminga knows his name appears in trade talks. Butler knows he could become a central piece in packages for another star. The youngsters feel whether the franchise truly believes in them or sees them only as assets for the market. That is where the importance of figures like Draymond Green comes in, someone willing to publicly defend a younger teammate, say that he is committed, that he deserves respect, that he is not the villain many make him out to be. That strengthens internal bonds at a moment when every player is looking over his shoulder, trying to work out whether he will still be part of the team's future. And that is why the recovery of their on-court identity cannot be underestimated. When the team goes back to playing with joy, intensity, and creativity, the mood shifts. A deep rotation, several players leading the team in scoring on different nights, aggressive defense, constant off-ball movement, trust in the extra pass. All of that brings back the feeling of, this is the real Golden State again. And when that feeling returns, it becomes easier to attract reinforcements, convince stars, keep youngsters, and make tough decisions without wrecking the environment. In the end, all these stories that seem separate, the possible arrival of Davis, the speculation around LeBron, the Kuminga drama, the marathon of games, the Clippers sinking, the passing and assist numbers, the defense climbing back to the top of the league, are part of the same central narrative, the attempt to rewrite the final chapter of the Curry era. Instead of a melancholic farewell, with early eliminations and internal fights for space, there is a real chance to turn these last years into something competitive, intense, worthy of what was built back then. The question that remains, and that ties everything together, is simple but heavy. What level of risk are you willing to take to see that happen? If you were in the front office's shoes, would you hit the button on the Blockbuster trade, embrace the risk of injuries, and bet that the talent of Davis and the magnetism of Curry and LeBron would make up for anything? Or would you hold your nerve, strengthen the current core, explore the market cautiously, let the team grow together, and trust that the identity they have rediscovered is, in itself, the path back to the top? Sotto has been drawing attention for his talent and the potential to become a dominant center in the league. Standing at 7'3", he's not only a rim protector but also a player who has greatly improved offensively. The question is, would he fit into the Warriors system? We know that adapting to the NBA is not easy, especially for a player coming from an international background, but Kai has already shown that he faces challenges head-on. Since beginning his professional basketball career, he has displayed an impressive learning curve and a growth mindset that could make all the difference. The Warriors always prioritize versatile players who know how to move well without the ball and contribute on both ends of the court. And that's where Sotto could shine. He's not just a traditional center who protects the paint, but also a mobile and intelligent player capable of helping with offensive plays. The big question now is, who will give Sotto this chance? The Warriors could benefit from a young and promising center, but other teams may also be eyeing him. What's certain is that he has all the potential to grow in the NBA, as long as he gets the right opportunity. Sotto's future is promising, but he still needs to find the team and system that best suit his style. If the Warriors decide to give him a chance, it could not only strengthen the roster, but also bring a new dynamic to Golden State's front court. After all, with the Warriors' winning mentality, the sky is the limit for any young talent. So, did you like the video? Don't waste any time and hit the like button because it helps a lot with spreading the word. If you have anything to add or want to share your opinion, leave a comment. We love hearing what you think. And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any updates about our team. See you next time, everyone. Let's go together towards another great season.